Good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and joining us today. We're just going to allow a few minutes for folks to get on, and then we'll get started here. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Thought Leadership Council live stream entitled Artificial Intelligence, Cutting Through the Noise. Today's live stream has been pre-approved for one HRCI recertification credit, and this information will be displayed at the end of the presentation. For those of you who may be joining as a guest of the HRO Today Association, I'd like to give you a quick overview of the benefits and programs offered and encourage you to consider joining hundreds of other HR professionals and become a member. The association is the premier global network of HR practitioners, service providers, and analysts who work together to advance the profession of human resources. Members improve the quality, effectiveness, and efficiency of their HR operations, service delivery, and technology strategy. Members engage with like-minded peers and access information and tools to ensure continuous improvement and future success. Share ideas and further develop your career while elevating the practice of HR by participating in committees and research, all aimed at improving the professionalism of human resources. Join online at hrotoday.com/association. What you are participating in today is what we refer to as a Thought Leadership Council, or TLC live stream. TLCs give association members a platform for professional development and ongoing learning, as well as opportunities to share their expertise. TLCs focus on 4 areas of HR: talent acquisition, talent management, employee relations and services, and outsourcing. Recordings of all these TLC sessions are made available on demand for association members to access at any time after the live broadcast. You can find the TLC library as well as a list of upcoming TLCs online at hrotoday.com/association/tools. You will need a member login to access the on-demand library. The association currently has 3 committees: Member Services, which focuses on things like the member website and newsletter; Professional Development and Programming, who work together to develop member networking opportunities and events; and finally, Standards and Practices, which plays an important role in our research and content development efforts. Certification is a powerful incentive that can elevate a profession and transform entire industries. At HRO Today, our Baker's Dozen customer satisfaction lists, magazine, research, as well as our company and team experience, combined with the collaboration of board of advisors, customers, and members, uniquely positions us with the knowledge and skills to create a successful certification program. The benefits of this program include, but are not limited to, providing a key strategy for helping individuals better position themselves in our competitive marketplace, helping to protect the health, safety, or welfare of consumers, helping to create standards of performance for the industry, and ensuring customers have access to qualified service providers. Information can be found on the association's website, which is once again hrotoday.com/association. And before I turn it over to today's speakers, I just wanted to mention quickly that registration is now open for HRO Today Forum EMEA in Dublin, Ireland from November 4th through the 6th this year. Visit hrotodayforum.com/EMEA to learn more. This event is a nice opportunity to learn and network with association members and other HR professionals from across the region. And lastly, the HRO Today Forum is our large annual event, which brings together leading HR thinkers, practitioners, technologists, and partners for 2.5 days of learning, best practice sharing, and networking. Attendees walk away from the forum with new ideas and solutions they can bring back to their organization and utilize immediately. And now I would like to turn things over to our speaker for today, Mike and Demetrius. Please take it away.
All right, thanks everyone. My name is Mike Dockenhouse. I'll do a brief intro in just a few minutes here, but wanted to take a moment. If you're not familiar with who Yo is as the sponsor of today's event, we are a top-ranked recruitment services firm headquartered in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Sorry, I'm based in Ohio. And I want to just start with offering out a few thank yous. First of all, to you as participants for joining us today in this live stream. I recognize that all of you have very busy schedules and are stretched for time. So taking the time out of your busy day to join us today, we are very appreciative of. I want to thank HRO Today for providing the forum by which Yo can come together and share some of our thoughts and concepts. And last but not least, I want to thank Ernst & Young and the partnership that we have had together and joining us today in the presentation of this data. For years at this point, there has been a conversation in the talent management, talent acquisition space, and the HR in general around the idea of artificial intelligence. The reality, though, from folks that I'm interacting with, specifically strategic leaders, they're still struggling to connect a number of the dots, due in large part to the technical nature of the topic of conversation. Where we are today is we've really moved from a concept that was being discussed 3 to 4 years ago to a reality today where many of these technologies that call themselves AI are being used and leveraged within the context of many HR organizations. And the reality is, outside of the HR practice, most of us are interacting with these types of technologies every day and may not even be aware of it in the general marketplace. So today what we wanted to do is pause and have a practical, hopefully easy to understand conversation about the topic of AI and advanced automation. So with that, Mark, if you could advance the next slide, please. So what we're going to do today, just our journey, is walk through some definitions together and an attempt to ground you with these topics and with these concepts. I want to speak a little bit about some practical applications that are being realized in the HR marketplace today. Frankly, we want to talk about some lessons learned and pitfalls to avoid, and then we'll take some time at the end to take any questions if any exist. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. And myself, Mike Dockenhouse, I am a director of operations within Yo's recruitment process outsourcing business. I am also a key stakeholder in what we would refer to as our digital transformation and digital enhancement processes. I've been involved for more than 15 years at this point in time and helping organizations transform their recruitment processes and recruitment delivery mechanisms. I am a technologist at heart, and so I love to look for opportunities and ways to add efficiencies into the general talent management process through the use of technology. So I'm glad to be with you here today, and I'm going to now hand it over to my partner from EY to allow him to introduce himself.
Thank you, Mike, and good morning, everyone. This is Dimitris Papageorgiou. I'm a principal in EY's People Advisory Services Group, part of our Intelligent Automation Center of Excellence. And I have been in the space of HR operations, global business services, and transformation as a whole for the last 20 years, 11 years in industry and 9 years with the consulting role that I presently held. So I think you will see that the attempt today is going to be to decipher a little bit through the noise, through some of the experiences that we have had as part of us responding to market demand in the last 3-4 years on intelligent automation and deciphering what AI truly means for HR practitioners.
With that, we're going to kick things. Yeah, with that, we're going to go ahead and kick things off with a quick polling question. So, Mark, we're going to ask everybody to take a moment and let us know on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the best, how confident are you as an individual in your understanding of AI and intelligent automation? So, give everybody an opportunity to go ahead and select their option there on your screen. We'll give everybody a couple of moments to respond, and then Mark's going to kick over the responses. Perfect. So, Mark, I'm not sure if you're able to show those responses, or there we go. All right. So we can clearly see that that very few people, in fact none, are feeling super confident, and the reality is nearly 70% of you are feeling less than stellar about your grasp of the topic, which is great. I appreciate you being honest there, and hopefully you find this this conversation of value. So with that, Dimitris, we're going to go ahead and move to the next slide. We're going to start digging into some of these concepts. Dimitris?
Yes, my apologies. I was actually disconnected, and I'm back on. So thankfully, I was able to dial in fairly fast. So the robotic process automation, quite honestly, the first thing to be said here is robotic as a naming convention is probably a misleading one, because instantly most individuals think of a physical robot like the ones we're accustomed to seeing in a assembly line for auto manufacturers, those robotic arms that are putting together cars. In essence, it's a software that it's meant to emulate human user behavior in front of a computer. So it uses the user interface and it emulates human characteristics in terms of entering information and transferring data from point A to point B or multiple points. So the first thing to be known is that it's software, it's surface level penetration. And for those of you that may not be as technical, means that it doesn't require to be mapped or connected behind the scenes with software in order to be operational. It uses simply the screen of the laptop or server or desktop that you may have in order to process whatever automation you want to bring forward. It's been around for many, many years, and it was used as an ERP solution, probably in the early 2000s, 2010, in some form, probably less evolved than what it is today. So it's nothing that it's groundbreaking from a technology perspective, but I think we have now made the connection on how to apply it in many other processes besides testing, as it was intended to be in the beginning.
Perfect. So, Mark, if you want to go ahead and advance, so a couple of real live experiences that you're probably interacting with on a regular basis. The idea of an automatic check deposit through your bank's mobile application. So while there's multiple technologies that are underpinning this particular example, at the core, it's about leveraging or emulating that human behavior, right? By using a computer interface. So from a commercial application perspective, using that app to take a picture of that check and make a deposit as an example, or from a business HR perspective, the processing of I-9s and W-4s and those types of things. But again, it's about this idea of automating repeatable tasks that are normally handled by human effort alone, typically. So just a couple of examples from the marketplace to help you ground that experience. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into the next.
So cognitive RPA is when we are taking the relatively easier type of automations and start applying logic. So, and it could be rules-based, it could be where we initially spend a little more time to train a bot. So this is where you may have heard the concept of machine learning being mentioned, at which point through repetition, the model that it's constructed through software and possibly an algorithm becomes sophisticated enough to start making deterministic actions on its own. That's where you would actually say that you're bringing forward smarter automation to life. And a perfect example for that I think it will probably resonate with many of us would be, it's not an HR example, but I think everybody quickly relates to it, is invoice processing. When a company receives invoices from multiple vendors, they're never the same format. But if you actually train the bot to know what is a PO, what is a date, what is the name of a vendor, then the bot, regardless of the format of the invoice, begins to analyze and process without human help. Mike, back to you.
Yep. So, Mark, a couple of examples as we think about cognitive RPA, again, recognizing that there's multiple things underpinning this from a technology perspective. But if you think about recommendations that you experience in the app based upon purchase history or browsing history. So, my wife and I recently went on a trip, and while we were traveling on the road, my wife was kind enough to grab my mobile device and jump online and start looking at automobiles, right? So now every time I log into my Facebook app on my phone, what do you see inserted into my Facebook stream but types of cars similar to what she was looking for? And, that's an example of how cognitive RPA, those algorithms and the way the machine learns starts to deliver an experience to me based upon what it knows about me, others like me, etc. And so on the business side of it, this would come into play when we're going, for example, through a learning development track. And as we are learning certain things, technologies, a learning management platform begins to make suggestions on what we may want to consume next from a user content perspective based upon our experience and our track to that point in time and how others similar to us have learned and transitioned. So that just, again, to settle you in on a couple of real world examples. Mark, if you could move on. Thanks.
So chatbots is probably something that we have been exposed to the most in our personal lives. I don't know how many of you have actually been in situations where you may be idling on a web page and all of a sudden a little pop-up comes up on the right bottom corner of the page that says, would you like some help? Any questions that we can answer for you? that in essence is a chatbot. What it does, it's supposed to give a little more of a humanistic feel to the interaction with a digital portal, and it's intended to be able to address I would say the level 0, level 1 type of inquiries that somebody would have on any topic. They do leverage a multitude of technologies behind them. So there is RPA behind chatbots. There is optical character recognition. There is a few peripheral technologies that are intended to take information from the physical world and digitalize it, because that's a step one to this process. But I would say that this is probably the one that we have seen also the most penetration from an application perspective in the HR space.
Absolutely. So, Mark, as we continue the conversation, some examples of where you're experiencing this, right? So if you have ever leveraged a chat call to action to place a order at a coffee shop or at a restaurant, you're essentially interacting with a chat bot. So chat bots can take the form of instant message bots that you see on a website, can take the message in form of SMS or text message via a mobile device. It can take the form of things like Facebook Messenger. There's a lot of different avenues that chatbot technology can take advantage of in order to communicate with you. I think on a business example side, and we'll see more of this later, being able to chat and engage with a piece of digital technology in a conversational format to accomplish a task. And again, so this is a combination, as Demetrius had mentioned, of some RPA, some machine learning, some natural language processing, these types of things. And it's intended to help create a conversational experience, right, to handle, as Demetrius had mentioned, those kind of tier 0, tier 1 tasks. The very rudimentary form of this back in the day would have been, as you call to deal with a technical issue with, let's say, your home internet service or those types of things, you can have this interactive voice response, which is essentially a voice-enabled chatbot. So just some examples for you to center in on there. So Mark, we'll go ahead and continue the conversation on the next topic.
Artificial intelligence is probably a catch-all definition, quite honestly, of many technologies. This is when you truly see an individual autonomous machine decisioning based on multiple inputs that are being provided to it from and through various mediums. Perfect example again for that, because I'd like to make things relatable to our everyday life. Autonomous driving. You have a vehicle that is actually reading the physical environment around it through sensors. It takes data from the vehicle itself, the driver, and synthesizes all this data in a format and in a way that enables the vehicle to actually be driven safely down the road. Or safely could be a term that we can argue on. But the intent is that you're now combining a multitude of data points to truly autonomize the decisioning by the machine. We can proceed.
So again, real-world examples of this as we're interacting with virtual personal assistants such as Siri and Alexa and others. It's the ability for these technologies to take a multitude of data points and interactions, right, and synthesize that into a decision-making process. Language transition on recruiting sites is very similar, or language matching into skills, those types of ways. And again, on this idea of artificial intelligence, right? We all interact with this every time we get on an airplane, as an example, every time we get on it, because essentially autopilot, right? That concept of autopilot is artificial intelligence that is taking into account all of these different elements and allowing the machine to do some decision making and predictive actions. So hopefully some of those examples help center you on these concepts a little bit better, give you a little bit more to work with or to sink your teeth in from a real life example perspective. We're going to pivot slightly to another advanced technology that you might be hearing a little bit of noise about in the marketplace, and we felt like there was enough of this conversation being had in different forums and different events that it probably made sense to pause and introduce it and discuss it here, and that being the concept of blockchain. So with that, Mark, let's go ahead and advance, and Demetrius is going to spend a little bit of time helping to break this down for us.
So blockchain, or otherwise known as a distributed ledger, in essence, is a way to decentralize data. The paradigm that exists today in the world is that we standardize and centralize data wherever possible through the use of servers, and we create a single source of truth, or at least try to create a single source of truth. In essence, blockchain is aspiring to do the same thing, the single source of truth, but without creating replication of data. So to give you an example of this, today's technology, actually, for you to view a website, in essence, you download temporary data in order to be able to view what you're viewing. Every time that you're transacting with a machine, there is a download and transfer of data. With blockchain, you will have the ability to access the same format of data from multiple points in the globe, but you're looking at the same data point. So there's no replication. So it changes the protocol of how the internet works. The way that it has come into our life, for most of us at least, is through Bitcoin, which was, I would say, very, very popular in recent years. And hopefully you all bought when Bitcoin was $15 and sold when it was $20,000. But if you didn't, if it didn't happen, you shouldn't feel too sorry about it, because quite honestly, there was a lot of people that lost money in the process. What it does, so for blockchain, very quickly, it's automation. So it enables through a universe of nodes, it enables the secure data transfers with a single source of truth that doesn't reside in multiple sets. So it's comprised of multiple data points, but you're always looking at a single source of truth. It has trust, because in order to be a node, in essence, somebody who can commit data or approve transactions, you have to go through a certification process. It creates transparency. As I mentioned, everybody sees the same version of data. There is no replication of servers that has to happen in order to know that something has been processed. Consensus, the fact that it needs multiple approvals in order to be committed to the block and become part of the chain. There's many individuals that actually have to commit that information into a hash in order to be moved into the history and thereby become immutable, which is a different characteristic of it. Once it becomes part of the record, I would say, it cannot change. Now, again, if you want to go really technical, there is a way where they call it a hard fork for blockchain, but that's probably not for this call. And last is the distribution. There is no limit as to how many people can be committing data into that model, that data model. And we are expecting that this is going to be very, very disruptive in the record keeping space, in the credentialing space, and in the educational kind of background screening space. Again, as a concept, it's probably something that eludes many. Everybody knows Bitcoin, but not necessarily understanding how it operates behind the scenes. But it's something that we should get really comfortable fairly fast, because I think it's going to be the most disruptive out of all the emerging technologies. Mike, back to you.
Yeah, so one of the key enablers of blockchain, Mark, as we move forward, one of the key enablers of blockchain being a reality is ultimately what has been referred to as the cloud, right? More and more data is existing on the cloud, which is enabling this technology really to be advanced. And so we felt it was important to introduce the concept of blockchain because, as Demetrius had mentioned, while there's a number of things to be kind of figured out, in particular in the HR talent management space, there is a strong belief by industry leaders that once those things begin to be checked down upon, there is going to be rapid acceleration and delivery of commercial product and commercial solutions to the marketplace. So become aware of it, track with it, because this is where portions of our industry are rolling to from a digital solution perspective. Some real examples that exist today in terms of startups. App2 is it's a career verification program. It's essentially giving individuals an ability to create their own dynamic profiles, and rather than having to go to all these different sources to create this profile, it becomes a centralized source of truth with regard to who they are, what those individuals are able to do, their career history, their career achievements. And as Demetrius had mentioned, it's not just a single source. It is a source of truth, but there are multiple entities that are contributing and validating that truth so that it can be trusted, right? So this idea of essentially a digital resume with multiple points of verification, so that as folks are looking at it, they can trust and know that it is true and verified. So App2 is an example. Blue Whale is a related example from a kind of gig or freelancer perspective. Again, it's this idea of blockchain being leveraged to validate and create a source of truth that can be trusted by those consuming the data. So it's a real technology that exists in the marketplace. Again, I think as Demetrius had mentioned, we really think when blockchain is going to gain momentum, it's really going to transform things like traditional background check processes, right? In today's world where physical people are having to go to courts and get court documents and then key those things in, as the courts buy into this idea of digitizing that content, and the blocks begin to be built and these chains exist, you now have a situation where candidates will own and control that data, and which will also mean they will own giving folks access to that data for the purposes of also rapidly accelerate the amount of time that it takes to complete those things as that source of truth is validated and made available. So I would encourage you all to continue to track with that because, as Demetrius had mentioned, it is going to be transformative. There's just a number of moving pieces and parts right now that are still trying to be figured out. And as more and more organizations come on board with that technology, we're going to see rapid acceleration. So Mark, with that, we're going to go ahead and move into our next session. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide. We got another polling question for you as an audience. So on a scale of 1 to 5, again, with 5 being the highest, to what extent do you believe automation could provide a better candidate or employee experience? So I'd encourage you to think about those technologies we've talked about and how we're interacting with those technologies as consumers, and ask yourself if those same types of environments and experiences existed within the context of talent management, and employee experience. Do you believe it would create a better overall experience? And to what extent do you believe that to be true? So we're going to give you all a few moments to answer this, and then we're going to go ahead and display those results, and we'll continue on in our conversation. All right, Mark, if we have the results, we'll go ahead and just throw that up. Perfect. And as suspected, there's well over half of you believe that it would definitely create a better candidate or employee experience. That's great. So we'll go ahead and move on. See, advanced technology really has quickly become a welcome addition to our everyday lives. So Mark, if you want to move on and pull that slide back up, that'd be great. All right. Again, AI and advanced technology is a welcome part of our everyday lives. Social media to automobiles, the machines are creating efficiencies. Those machines are now found all across the entire talent management portal. Opportunities to realize significant value through these digital strategies exist over the entire employment life cycle. And I think it's important for you to understand that as a leader or as a practitioner, these things are going to move, these expectations in terms of automation and advanced technology in these topical areas. They're going to move from being new and cutting edge to being expected. And I would equate it back in the day. Remember when the first time, I may be dating myself here, but the first time that a camera showed up on a mobile phone, and we thought, well, that, how much is that going to be used, right? To today's world, where if you get a phone without a camera, you're disappointed. And I think we need to recognize that as the millennial generation and others get involved in talent acquisition, talent management space, they become involved in your organizations as employees, they are going to begin to demand, they already are demanding and expecting to have a consumer-like experience with your internal business processes and HR organization. So I think there's a lot of opportunity across the ecosystem, and I would encourage you to embrace it and pursue it, because it is going to be an expectation, if not already, by your employee population. Mark, we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. From a true recruitment, talent acquisition perspective, I think this from LinkedIn is a very good view of where should we think about automation and AI. And the idea here is certainly that lower left panel is really where most of the automation has been realized within the HR recruiting space. And I would encourage you to look through that, look for opportunities. If you've not already solved for that, you need to solve for it, because again, it is going to be an expectation of the business. And what that will ultimately do is free people up to manage those things in the top right-hand corner of this quadrant that are low probability of automation, but add incredible value to the experience. So what's interesting here, again, I think about the phenomena of Starbucks and the idea that people are paying $4 for a cup of coffee. Ultimately, what they are paying for is not the coffee, they're paying for the experience. And our talent is expecting that as they are beginning to interact with our organizations. There's a certain level of expectation these things are being taken care of. And what these technologies do is ultimately free up our people, our TA people, to focus on creating an incredible experience for talent as they come into our organizations. So some real life opportunities for the use of advanced technology in our HR and talent organizations. Mark, we'll go ahead and continue.
So on the topic of AI and intelligent automation for talent management, I would say that when you think of suitable processes as to what is an area where you can potentially apply automation, start the journey in essence, think of processes that are repetitive, well documented, fairly standardized, and have a substantive enough volume to justify automating. Because if it's something that happens once a month for 10 minutes, you probably would not have a great ROI or enhance enough the employee experience to justify the spend. So if you look at that graph that we have here, the more specialized the process is, the less likely you'll find it to be suitable for automation, at least the low-level RPA. It could be suitable for cognitive RPA or for AI. The problem is it's probably also going to be much more complex and much lengthier in time of development in order to develop that solution. And you may start losing momentum in the organization. So our recommendation is always to focus on the generalized and fairly heavy from a transactional perspective processes that you can showcase quick wins and use them also as a change management tool as well as a training tool to get the organization moving in the right direction. One additional comment: when we work with clients, especially from the EY lens, we make sure to make them understand that this is not about elimination of people. It could lead in many cases to elimination of jobs, but it also creates jobs. And the best way that we have seen automation come to life in many of the clients that we have worked with is when we integrate human in the loop, as it's being referred to, where a process doesn't necessarily have to be 100% automated. It could be the first 40% of the process automated, then a person does something, and then another 30% of the process is automated again after the person authorizes for the process to proceed, and then the last piece needs possibly a human to complete the 100% cycle. So it's not always that you have to find a process that has 10 documented steps that are 100% automatable. It could be parts of the process that are meaningful enough, voluminous enough for you to do something in regards to automation. Moving on to the next slide, you will see what we refer to as the digital journey. You've heard about all these various technologies during our discussion with Mike and Mark, and I would say that there is a building a process that you have to follow in order to bring this again to life in a sustainable manner. Robotic process automation is the most popular and also the most, I would say, sustainable way of moving forward in the organization. It's relatively low cost from a spend, relatively easy for individuals to learn how to use, monitor, and troubleshoot this type of technology. And it has I would say, an ROI timeline that in most organizations it's highly desirable. About 65% of any given organization's processes in the HR space, I would say, would find some type of application around RPA. Then you have RPA cognitive, where you start using the machine learning, the natural language processing, and in essence, introduce technologies that are making deterministic, I would say, interventions to the transactioning process. And about 15% of processes will find application there. And you move, once you have, I would say, mastered those two, then I would say you're probably ready to get into the intelligent chatbots. And we're making the distinction between intelligent chatbots versus a chatbot that is purely transactional, because that intelligent chatbot, in essence, you could be conversing with a chatbot on the phone and not know that you're speaking to a digital agent. They have the ability to convert language to text and text to language. So that's NLP, natural language processing, natural language generation. And there are companies out there that have already adopted this model. And last is the artificial intelligence, where you now have taken the aggregate of all these technologies and start applying the autonomous decision making through sophistication in the process, as well as the ability to let the process operate on its own in a fully unattended manner. Mike, any comments?
No, you did a phenomenal job of walking us through that. Thank you so much. So as we transition now, we'll spend a little bit of time discussing some lessons learned, kind of word of caution, things we've alluded to. But we're going to start again with a quick poll question. So if you could again scale 1 to 5, how confident are you as a practitioner leader in the design and implementation of these advanced technologies for your organization? So how confident are you in being kind of the champion or the voice of vision for your organizations on a scale of 1 to 5? Perfect. Mark, we'll go ahead and show those results. All right. So again, an opportunity to gain some confidence. So hopefully content like this gives you a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more understanding. There's some great resources through HRO Today and other forums to learn more and more about these types of technologies. And we'll also provide you with some content here in the coming days that will assist you on your journey. So we'll go ahead and jump in here a little bit and attempt to equip you with just a few things. This idea of automation, you could automate, but should you, right? Our encouragement for you, as Dimitris had just mentioned, just because you have an opportunity to automate an end-to-end process doesn't mean you should necessarily. You need to be able to balance the user and stakeholder experience through that automation process and take that into account. I know of a couple of our competitors in the marketplace who have built end-to-end, fully automated recruitment systems, and they've actually had to then pull those out of the marketplace and retool them, because what they found was the user experience. There's a point in time where the user started to have very poor experiences with the technology, gained frustration, and withdrew. So they have found that they needed to inject, and we have found this to be true certainly within our organization, you need to inject the appropriate amount of human touch in order to create the best experience. So just because you can, should you need to pause and ask yourself that question. Dimitris?
The second, I think, contemplation that we have is, do you try to control automation or do you enable its acceleration? And I would say that the right answer is you do both in moderation. The control is absolutely necessary. We have seen many situations where a program is well-funded, well-supported by the organization, but it doesn't have the proper governance and controls, and very quickly it fails. Because it's not simply about automating the process, but you have to understand that you're operating in a universe and in an infrastructure within an enterprise that changes as maybe not as much as your process changes, but the systems or the individuals that the process touches upon may be changing. To give you an example, if there's an update in Outlook and you haven't accounted for it in your automation and you have a bot that opens up an email, when that update for Outlook happens, it may render the bot not working. If that bot is a bot that is performing a critical mission, it will be a problem. On the same hand, delaying automation or postponing automation because you have an HCM underway or other initiatives happening is probably not the right answer as well. You want to be the individuals that are bringing this forth, and you want to have it closer to you in order to be able to control it. But enabling it is the way forward, because if you're not, your competitors are. I can for sure tell you that this is not going away. This is not going to slow down. So the sooner individuals become well versed and start adopting it in a meaningful way, the more impactful it will be to them personally as well as their organizations.
The next thing we would encourage you to contemplate this idea is robots do exactly as they're told, or do they, right? And again, this comes down to a consideration of what type of advanced technology are you using. Certainly on the RPA side of the equation, it's rules-based, algorithms-based, and it's important to realize that when you are running in a rules-based or algorithm-based environment, those processes, those technology-enabled automations are very, very literal. So just as Demetrius had mentioned with an Outlook update, they're very literal. They go here, they click here, they do that, and when that user interface changes and that button is no longer there to click, things fail. Conversely, if you're using cognitive RPA, or you're getting into true artificial intelligence, right? AI will begin to make assumptions based upon data and based upon trends, and sometimes that can lead to some challenges. So in all things, whether you are dealing with RPA or dealing with true AI, our recommendation from our experience is that they still require some level of monitoring by people, right, in order to identify challenges, correct challenges. I think we've all heard over the last several years how some of the social networks and YouTubes and others, their algorithms, their AI started to make decisions with regard to content that were not intended to happen. So they still, even YouTube, if you spend any time doing some research, they have literally thousands of moderators that are moderating the decisions that are being made by their technology. So human intervention is still very important, but that type of human intervention changes, and we just need to take into consideration that these different types of technologies will run with things either very, very literally or cognitively based upon trends and data, and still require some level of oversight. Demetrius?
The last question on this page is, do you change your people or change the way your people work? And I will say again, you probably need to do both in moderation. The hiring our way out of the need that emerges now for automation is not possible. The talent pool is not there. So there is a lot of retraining that has to be done, especially in the U.S. where there is a very, very tight labor market. So rethinking how to utilize people, understanding what they may have in their background, because I will tell you the way that we do talent and view talent today in many organizations may be a bit monochromatic, because we see what people have been hired for in the organization, not necessarily taking into account what they may have done in their past, or what they may have abilities on that are not exercised through the workplace. So being able to actually apply a lens and decipher what individuals' aptitude is in terms of learning and giving them new, possibly more exciting career paths is a requirement to be able to staff up organizations. And in essence, also bring some external talent to infuse and accelerate that adoption. At the same time, people have to change the way that they do work today. I think work today has been constructed in an organizational model and a functional hierarchy model that is quickly becoming outdated. What do I mean by that? If you look at, and I'll give you an HR example, onboarding, the onboarding process, we tend to think of onboarding as an HR process, but we do know that there is an IT onboarding. We do know that there is a finance onboarding and security premises onboarding. If you were to automate the process, why not automate across the enterprise, going functionally, cross-functionally, versus automate per function, because the same data is propagated through the enterprise. So changing the way people work and thinking of processes, I would say, is another requirement to truly extract value from these emerging technologies.
And as we drive the conversation forward, there's a couple of different ways that you can move ahead. Mark, if we want to go ahead and drive this conversation, there's this idea of, and I'm really going to talk about the left side here, this idea of tool-led design. I'm not suggesting that there is not some value to be had in tool-led design, but you need to be very cognizant that by using a tool-led design, that means we're going to allow the product that we've selected or the solution we've selected drive our design process. You may gain some automation. You may not gain the transformation that you are looking for. It becomes a very siloed approach to solving some element of automation. So I would caution you, not that tool-led design is always wrong, but I would caution you not to have too narrow of a focus when talking about this idea of automation and selecting tools to solve automation. And I think Demetrius is really going to touch on this idea of having a slightly expanded view, which he just alluded to earlier.
Thank you, Mike. And you're absolutely right. Tool-led design is not necessarily always to be avoided, but I think taking a critical view to the process and ensuring that, one, it is worth pursuing from an automation perspective. Two, it has all the characteristics that we would want a process to have in terms of moving forward. And three, we actually have the ability to support and sustain said automation. Are critical components besides the tool. So the tool, in essence, in my mind, is the last consideration to whether or not you should apply an automation to a process. You need to rethink why the process is there in the first place. Why do we do this? And not how do we do it today and how can we do it different with the technology? Why do we do it? Is there a way that we can actually improve the intended outcome from the process and then start applying the system or tool possibilities to that desired outcome? One component that it's not mentioned here, but it's extremely critical as well, is the people component. Aligning this with individuals that may not have a passion or the credentials, the qualifications from an expertise perspective may also be detrimental to a project. So having the right people and the right considerations as to how you're going to bring this forward to the organization in a meaningful and productive manner versus a threatening manner, which often happens again in many of our clients, where they are not cautious enough to inform and actually get the buy-in from their personnel that they're addressing automation to, tends to lead to undesired outcomes, undesired attrition, and so forth. And usually you will lose the people that you didn't want to lose, not the ones that you wouldn't have a problem with them going.
And then
So,
I think, Mark,
yes,
Mark, we really have one last kind of content slide that further supports this concept that Demetrius is going to share with us as we wrap here in the next 30 to 45 seconds or so.
So very quickly, when you go through a contemplation for a process, think of transformative manner questions such as, how do we stop work coming into the organization? Instead of trying to automate the transaction, is there a way to eliminate the transaction? Is there a way that we can have someone else do the transactions besides you? Is it something you can put on the vendor, something you can put on the candidate, and in a meaningful way that enhances the experience? Deflect. If work exists, how do we determine who and how it is handled? And last, automate. If the work for the work that remains, what can be automated so we can focus on the moments that matter. And perfect example again in that is how much more impactful recruiters would be if they spend time on connecting with the candidates and getting them comfortable explaining things to them versus transacting documents or requisitions in systems. With that said, I'll turn it back to Mike and appreciate everybody's time.
Yep. So, Mark, if you want to just roll forward a couple of slides here, we have another use case example here that we've alluded to. Again, I want to thank our partners at EY for joining us today and for all of you in participating. With that, Mark, we're going to hand it back over to you. And unfortunately, we lost time for questions and answers, but we'll try our best to follow up with any answers to questions as a follow-up to the webinar. Mark?
Well, thank you, Mike and Demetrius. That was an excellent presentation. Before we end our live stream today, here is the information you will need if you are planning to apply for a CHRI recertification credit. The activity ID number that you will need for your recertification application form is 401467. Again, that number is 401467. For more information about certification or recertification, please visit the HR Certification Institute website at www.hrci.org. Thank you again for attending today's Thought Leadership Council live stream. As mentioned earlier, you can always find a list of upcoming TLC live streams and the TLC On Demand library on hrotoday.com/association. Thanks again for your participation and have a great day.